Welcome to The Jewish World, the show that discusses the week's most pressing issues facing the Jewish state, the Jewish people, and the global Jewish community. It may surprise you to learn that the most common baby name in Israel this past year was Muhammad. Yes, you heard that right. 2,646 baby boys born in 2018 were named Muhammad. The Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics released its annual baby names report, and here are the top baby names of the past year. For Jewish boys, the most popular baby name was a classic, David, with 1,447 babies given this name, followed by Ariel, given to 2% of Jewish boys, and then Noam, Lavi, and Yosef. Also making the top 10 were classics like Eitan, Daniel, Yehuda, and Moshe. For Jewish girls, the most popular baby name for the third year in a row was Tamar, with 1,289 baby girls given this name, followed by Maya, Avigail or Abigail, Noah, and Ayala, as well as classics like Yael, Sarah, and Shira, along with some more fashionable names like Adele and Romi. And for Muslim girls, the most popular baby name was Miriam, given to 523 babies. The report found that girl names like Ayala, Carmel, Shaili, Geffen, Anael, Emmanuel, Arya, Emma, and Eve were all on an upwards trend since the year 2000, while classic Israeli names like Aya, Hila, Lihi, Linoy, Eden, Sheli, and Shira were on the decline. The report also found that parents are choosing traditional boys' names such as Yehuda, Raphael, Aaron, Shimon, Binyamin, and Hillel, which are once again increasing in popularity. This alongside names with a foreign origin like Roy, Leo, Leroy, Sean, and Tom, which have also increased in popularity. And it's interesting to see that in Tel Aviv, the most popular girl's name was Maya, while in Jerusalem, Sarah was the most common girl's name, while for boys, David was the most common name in Jerusalem, and Eitan was the most common name in Tel Aviv. They're babies one day, and the next, they're off to join the army. My first guest, Celeste Tucker from Australia, is joining us now here from Israel. She's on a birthright tour, but not your typical tour. She's here as part of a delegation of lone soldier mothers on a momentum journey in partnership with the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Nefesh B'Nefesh, which brought together mothers from the USA, Australia, Canada, South Africa, and the UK to visit and tour around Israel and reunite with their children. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So first of all, how are you enjoying Israel?
Oh, I'm loving it. We're having a fabulous time.
That's great. So why don't we start, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your story, your personal story, and why your daughter decided to enlist in the IDF.
Well, Sarah came to Israel when she was about 4.5 for a family simcha, and loved Israel and fell in love with it. And again in year 10, her school brought the year 10 group on a Shorashim program, which is a 3-week trip to Israel. And while she was here, she really grew to love Israel, and she had a look around and decided this is where she wanted to come after school, but she didn't want to do the usual go to a kibbutz or go on a shnat program. She wanted to give something back, and she decided that the IDF was for her, and she did a bit of research into it and decided through the Machal program to sign up for the IDF for an 18-month volunteer program where she would join the army and give back to Israel and protect her land. As she said, it's her land and her people, and she wanted to give back to them.
And how did you feel about this decision? Were you supportive? Were you opposed? Were you apprehensive, as most mothers I hear are?
Of course we were apprehensive. You're always going to be apprehensive. When we thought about possibly coming to Israel many years ago, it was my husband and I said, we don't want to put our boys in the army. I've got 2 sons as well. And here I am with a daughter who signed up for the IDF, and we absolutely support her. Once she explained what she wanted to do and why, we are 100% behind her. But there's always that apprehension because we're so far away. We really are very far away in Australia.
And you mentioned she's in the Mahal program. What exactly does she do in the army?
So she signed up, she's in the artillery unit, so she signed up as a combat soldier.
So a little bit nerve-wracking there.
A little bit nerve-wracking that my 5'5" daughter will be carrying a gun that's probably just about as big as she is.
And so let's talk about your trip now and the reunion. How was it, and when was the last time that you'd seen your daughter?
Well, I was the one who hadn't seen my daughter the longest. The last time I saw her was in January of this year when she got on a plane to come to Israel. Wow. The reunion was There were tears everywhere from me, from Sarah, from everyone in the room, from all the other mothers and their soldiers. It was amazing to actually just be able to hold my child again.
And so what do you feel this trip has given you above all else, other than, of course, being able to see your daughter, to reunite with your daughter again?
Look, it's given me a very good insight into what she'll be doing. But what it's really shown me is that the army actually gives back. We take it for granted that our children are giving. And mothers of children who live in Israel, their children are also giving to their country. But the army gives back as well. It gives them courage, it gives them maturity, it gives them responsibility, something that a normal 17 or 18-year-old child doesn't learn at 17 or 18. They only get that at 23, 24, 25 when they finish their degree. The army is giving them a lot of responsibility, a lot of maturity, and teaching them life skills that they'd never get anywhere else. So for me, that was a big eye opener. That they're not only giving, they're receiving as well.
Well, Celeste, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your trip here in Israel.
I will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, America is reeling following the 3 mass shootings over the past 2 weekends, one in El Paso, Texas, another in Dayton, Ohio, and the first in Gilroy, California, which left roughly 32 people dead and dozens gravely injured. But in Israel, a country sadly used to sudden tragedies, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israelis abound are today offering their heartfelt condolences. With Netanyahu saying that on behalf of the government of Israel, he sends his best wishes to the bereaved families and those injured in the horrific attacks. The Israeli Prime Minister, of course, said that he stands shoulder to shoulder with the American people during this difficult time, while op-ed suggests that again the U.S. adopts some of the Israeli laws concerning gun control. But Jewish communities in the States are likewise rallying around the victims. For example, in El Paso, Rabbi Stephen Leon, a conservative rabbi in the city, said at least 15% of the country's Hispanic population has Jewish origins, because many of these Hispanic Jews may actually be Bnei Anusim, the descendants of Jews who were forced to convert to Christianity to escape persecution due to the Catholic Inquisition. Therefore, according to the rabbi, the Walmart shooting was not only an attack on Hispanics, but Jews as well. Regardless, members of the Jewish community in the city have rallied to show their support by donating blood and participating in fundraising campaigns to help the victims, explaining that as Jews, their job is to make the world a better place, in reference to the Jewish tenet of Tikkun Olam, or world repair. Anti-Defamation League CEO Jonathan Greenblatt also made a statement saying that he offers his thoughts and prayers to the grieving communities, but that there are far too many incidents like this in the U.S. today. Further, currently, along with law enforcement, the ADL is reviewing El Paso shooter Patrick Crusius' manifesto to track his hate speech and to examine if he had any ties to other extremists, especially as he is responsible for one of the deadliest domestic attacks of violence on U.S. soil in the last 50 years. Similarly, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the American Jewish Community, various Jewish federations, and the American Reform Movement also all joined the chorus condemning this extreme hatred. And in Dayton, where 9 people were brutally murdered, the editor of the Dayton Jewish Observer, Marshall Weiss, applauded the local police for being the true heroes in this tragedy. And finally, we at the Jewish World want to express our true solidarity with the victims following the news of these latest shootings. This, as the latest shooting brings the total up to 250 mass shootings in the U.S. in 2019 alone. It's summertime, which means that here in Israel, it's concert season. As Israelis get especially hyped for some of the big names to perform in Tel Aviv. Bon Jovi was here, and Jennifer Lopez just kicked off her new tour here in Israel on Thursday. And here to talk about the concerts, but more importantly, why they are such a national phenomenon here in Israel, is our very own concert goer, ILTV's Nittany Mason.
Thanks for having me, Lidar.
So Nittany, let's start with Jennifer Lopez, or J-Lo. She was in Israel this past weekend, and the country just went crazy.
Yeah, Lidar, as you said, J-Lo kicked off the start of her It's My Party tour here in Tel Aviv. And of course, Jenny from the block brought her family and baseball star fiance Alex Rodriguez too. And her concert at Tel Aviv's Hayarkon Park was incredible. There were over 50,000 people in attendance, and she basically just completely wowed the crowd.
Well, there's no doubt that her performance was amazing. She is J-Lo after all. But Israelis weren't just impressed with her performance, right? Every time a musician comes here, it's almost as important, if not more important to Israelis, that they enjoy Israel.
That's
it's
right.
a very unique approach, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's definitely true. In Israel, people really want international stars to come and have a good time. I think to a certain extent, they want the world to know that Israel's not just about the conflict, and it's important that people get to know the real side of Israel, the fun side.
Okay, well, not to mention that the majority of stars who announce they'll be visiting Israel are subject to relentless and aggressive BDS campaigns against them.
Exactly. And so when someone finally does stand up in the face of BDS and come to Israel, it just makes it that much more important to Israelis that they have a good time here, and they also show the world that Israel really looks like this, that it's a fun place.
And this is something that no other country has to contend with.
That's true. The BDS movement obviously singles out Israel, and so any artist that wants to perform here really has to stand up to harassment, threats, and such. And so we've seen many stars actually pull out of concerts in Israel at the last minute. This is why it's such a big deal to Israelis. They feel that no other country in the world has to deal with this kind of double standard. But luckily, there are many artists willing to stand up to BDS. So we've had people recently like Madonna, Britney Spears, Bon Jovi, as you said, and J-Lo.
And J-Lo seemed to have had an amazing time while here in Israel.
Yes, she posted a lot of pictures on her social media all throughout the trip, as did her fiancé. There's a picture of her at the Tel Aviv beach where you basically can't believe she's 50. She looks amazing. There's pictures of her in Jerusalem with her family. And her fiancé, Arad, also posted a bunch of pictures from Israel with captions on them, like just loving the place, loving it.
And this is obviously very important to Israelis and to Israel and its image abroad.
Yeah, I think that J-Lo and her fiancé have millions of followers who see these beautiful pictures of Israel and hear wonderful things about the country they usually hear only negative things about. So of course, since we're talking about social media, there's a lot of haters and BDS activists who post a lot of negative comments in response. But for the most part, it was incredible hasbara, or PR, for Israel.
And J-Lo isn't the only artist to visit this concert season, is that right?
Yeah, she's not the only one. She's might be the biggest one, but not the only. Bon Jovi was recently here, as we said, for the second time in just a few years. I actually went to the concert, and it was amazing. Tens of thousands of people, so much energy. Lionel Richie also has caused headlines recently when he blocked BDS activists that were calling on him to not visit Israel on his upcoming tour.
So would you say that there is a positive trend here of more and more artists sort of opposing BDS, standing up to BDS, and coming to Israel?
It's too soon to say if it's really a trend, but it does seem like more and more artists are already aware of the BDS pressures, and many are choosing to stand up to it and come anyways.
Well, that's good news, especially for Israeli fans, but for the Jewish state as well. Nittany, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure, Lidar.
This past week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with senior U.S. officials, including White House advisor Jared Kushner, to discuss the next steps of the U.S. peace plan, or the deal of the century, as it's been called. Kushner was on a tour of the Middle East to drum up additional support and discuss the plan with the region's leaders. And so the question remains, what are the prospects for peace? This week's meeting took place amid political uncertainty in Israel as the country is headed for a second round of elections on September 17th and takes place amid a changing international landscape. And so here to discuss the U.S. peace plan and the prospects for peace between the Jewish state and the Palestinians is Dr. Martin Sherman, Executive Director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Sherman, you've been very critical about the U.S. peace plan and it actually being able to do what it promises, right? Provide peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Why is that?
Well, let me say, I'm skeptical in general about the prospects of peace with the Palestinians, and I'm skeptical specifically about the Trump plan. Why I'm skeptical in general is because I believe that the bargain that needs to be struck between us and the Palestinians is insoluble. In other words, I think the maximum that Israel can offer and still maintain minimum security is less than the minimum that the Palestinians can accept if you really believe what they want to do is set up a state of their own rather than dismantle the Jewish state. So I find it very difficult to envision any plan that can satisfy both Israel's requirements and the Palestinian desires.
Right, well, we don't really know the details of the political aspect of the plan, but Israel going in is, I think, in a much stronger position, right? Because President Trump has already, for example, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. What's your take on this?
Well, I think Israel's position has improved over the years quite remarkably, but unfortunately, I don't think this is because of any enhanced Israeli policy. We had Sisi take over Egypt from the Muslim Brotherhood. We had Trump win the election against Hillary against all odds. So, if things had gone the other way, we would be in a very, very difficult position. And there's no guarantee that the fair winds that are blowing at the moment will continue. I think that Israel has been a little remiss in not capitalizing on this, the goodwill in Washington today, and bolstering its hold and securing its hold in Judea and Samaria, so that any thought of relinquishing it will be unfeasible.
In fact, quite the contrary. The Israeli government has just approved the building of a number of Palestinian homes in Judea and Samaria. What's your take on this?
I think that's sending the wrong message. For Israel to endure as the nation state of the Jewish people, it has to address adequately two imperatives: a geographic imperative and a demographic imperative. The geographic imperative means it must hold at least enough territory to make any Palestinian state untenable, and the demographic imperative means it has to reduce the Arab presence there in order to allow it to become a dominantly Jewish state. Because if you extend sovereignty over the whole of Judea and Samaria and leave the Arab presence there, I don't think that a Jewish state will be viable, even if the optimistic demographers are correct and your initial Muslim minority is only 35 to 40%. I don't think that's a recipe for Lebanizing Israeli society. And so I believe that the only policy that can ensure the existence of Israel over time as the nation state of the Jewish people is large-scale incentivized immigration of the Arab population there to allow them to find more prosperous and more secure lives in third-party countries and free from the clutches of the cruel, corrupt cliques who've led them astray for decades.
But that seems like a very unlikely scenario.
No, not really. I don't think so. Because first of all, if you look at Gaza, there's a huge desire in Gaza to leave. In fact, the only thing preventing a massive exodus from Gaza is the lack of money. And if Israel were to provide relocation funds and dismantle the Hamas regime there, I'm sure that the Gazans would be very happy to find a better and more prosperous life elsewhere.
Now, let's just take a look at the world stage as well, because that will play a significant role. We see new leadership in the UK. We see anti-BDS resolutions being announced in Europe, in Germany, and in the United States. And we see Israel befriending many of the Arab states due to, let's say, the threat of Iran. How do you think this will affect the peace plan, if at all?
Well, the atmosphere might be slightly more clement in Israel's favor, but that doesn't mean that we don't have to solve the problem. Because one thing I do agree with the left wing in Israel is that the status quo over a long term is unsustainable. I mean, you look at Gaza. What's the plan for Gaza in 20 years' time? And in the same, you can ask the same question about Judea and Samaria. So whilst I think political pressures might be lessened, it doesn't lessen the need for finding a solution, which, as I've said before, in my opinion, is a large-scale incentivized immigration of the Arab population to find a better and more prosperous life elsewhere.
And do you envision the Trump peace plan addressing this at all?
Well, there are rumors that certain aspects of that are in the Trump plan, that they see a suggestion that a large number of Palestinian Arabs will be resettled in Jordan and be naturalized as Jordan citizens. So it's not as general as the principle that I'm addressing, but there certainly are specific elements that seem to be consistent with the suggestion.
Great. Well, Dr. Martin Sherman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And on a positive note, despite efforts by the BDS movement and the far left, a delegation of 41 Democrats led by House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer arriving in Israel today for a nearly week-long visit to learn about issues critical to the U.S.-Israel relationship and international security.
The delegation will meet with senior Israeli as well as Palestinian government officials, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, opposition leader Benny Gantz, and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. While here, they will also visit the historical and cultural sites, including Yad Vashem. The trip is organized by the American Israel Education Foundation, a charitable organization affiliated with AIPAC. And this trip is more important than ever as the Democratic Party is facing an internal crisis, especially with regards to Israel. Many are beginning to perceive the party as anti-Israel, and this trip of freshman congressmen, many of whom have never been to Israel, is an attempt to show that the Democratic Party has not turned its back on the Jewish state. A Republican delegation of similar size is also expected to arrive later this week, headed by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Most noticeable, perhaps, is who is not on the trip, namely the 3 freshman congresswomen who have been so vocally opposed to Israel and supportive of the BDS movement. Representatives Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who have announced they will lead a separate delegation to the region, one that is not supported by AIPAC, whom Ilhan Omar has accused in the past of dual loyalty and buying support for Israel. Despite the internal crisis brewing within the Democratic Party, it's nice to see that so many Democrats have decided to reject BDS and visit the region to see firsthand what Israel has to offer.
Despite the internal crisis brewing within the Democratic Party, it's nice to see that so many Democrats have decided to reject BDS and visit the region to see firsthand what Israel has to offer. And on that note, that's all the time we have for this week's show. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and all of you, our viewers, for tuning in. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any stories, whether about anti-Semitism, BDS, or any positive events going on in your Jewish community. You can reach out to us on Facebook at Israel English News or just give us a like. And you can also reach out on Twitter at ILTV News and on our website at iltv.tv. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Thanks for watching.